I received the poem Mental Cases by Wilfred Owen. This poem is a three stanza poem, which is comprised of the first stanza containing 9 lines, the second, once again, 9 lines, and the third, 10. First of all, I'd like to focus a little bit on both the title as well as the context of the author. We know the author being Wilfred Owen before reading the poem that this is most likely going to be work poetry, as this is what he often focused on. From the title, Mental Cases, the topic of the poem is quickly laid out. Mental cases is often someone who has represents someone who has lost their sanity, or and this connects to war, as in the effects of war and the ways in which it will cause people to quickly lose their sanity. So, simply from the title, the meaning of the poem can already be noticed, and we can see that this poem is most likely going to be about people who have been changed and potentially scarred through war. Um, Throughout this poem, Wilfred Owen uses a large amount of iambic pentameter, this meaning that each line is comprised of 10 syllables. This, in a sense, demonstrates a contrast between war and a certain amount of structure. So, war is often perceived as very chaotic. However, we can see that throughout this poem, Wilfred Owen makes an attempt to add some form of structure towards the poem as a whole, therefore demonstrating the contrast between war and structure simply and organization simply through the use of this. And this ties back to mental cases, in the way that you may try to treat a mental case through a certain amount of structure, but how this may be lost throughout war. Um, this iambic pentameter also aids to the fluency of the poem, causing it to further be embedded in our thoughts, for due to this specific rhyme. Throughout this poem, a lot of imagery is often expressed. This is in order to really portray the true message of Wilfred Owen about the mental cases in this situation, through a lot of imagery such as shadows and baring teeth, drooping tongues. We can already see this dark tone which Wilfred Owen is displaying throughout the poem. Throughout this poem, there are generally two key tones, this being the tone of despair as well as the tone of helplessness or weakness. These are essentially the two emotions felt by the mental cases. They are both helpless, um, because they no longer have the strength mentally to fight in the war. They have subdued to what has occurred in the war. And they are also in a time of despair. These mental cases are sitting there and experiencing murders. It states blood black, blood smear, constantly repeating murders. In the second stanza, in both lines 2 and 3, murder is repeated. And once also in the last line of the first stanza, the word hell is repeated twice, further demonstrating this tone of despair. sleeping and walk hell, but who these hellish? So this is sort of demonstrating the emotions felt by the mental cases, but also those viewing the mental cases. We must understand that this would be the way Wilfred Owen experienced these mental cases throughout the war. As Wilfred Owen experienced firsthand war and therefore writes a large amount of war poetry, we can see that this is an account of the way he sees mental cases and the way he perceives what they're going through, and the despair not only that they are feeling, but that he is feeling towards them and towards the effects of war. Further, the tone of helplessness is portrayed through words such as slow panic or swelters, picking, pawing. In the last three lines of the third stanza, we hear picking at the rope knots of their scourging, snatching after us whom smote them, brother, pawing us who dealt them war and madness. So this portrays a key message of the poem, as well as lending to tone. He's using similar words of picking and pawing, in a sense that alliteration, similar sound, to demonstrate for further emphasis of the tone. Picking and pawing are both very weak actions, so he's demonstrating throughout this poem the weakness of the mental cases, how they have been completely subdued, and there is nothing that they can do about this. And throughout this constant bombardment of imagery throughout the three stanzas, we can really be emotionally influenced by what both Wilfred Owen experienced, as well as the mental cases and almost the horrors and what occurs to these people, which they have no control over. They sign up for war and then are suddenly experiencing all these terrible side effects of the war. So Mental Cases is essentially a poem documenting the horrors and the effects on the brain, on the mind, in these people through war. Thank you.